morning, everybody.
Morning.
So, a man named Travis Alexander was found by his friends dead in the shower. It was stated on the CBSnews.com that a woman named Jodi Arias was stabbed a man who was once her boyfriend, which was at Travis Alexander, 30 times. Not only did she stab him 30 times, but she shot him in the forehead, she sliced his neck, and then dragged his naked body and left him in the shower. Now, she hasn't been sentenced yet. She was only found of first-degree murder, and she hasn't been sentenced yet because it is still contemplating whether they're going to give her the death penalty or not. And, of course, some people might say, give her the death penalty, you know, she deserves it after the stuff she did. But in my opinion, I think no, don't give her the death penalty, because I think it's the easy way out. In an interview done by the Fox-affiliated KSAZ, Jodi Arias said that she would prefer to die sooner than later, and that death is the ultimate freedom. That's the reason why I say the heck with giving her the death penalty. It's her freedom. I would like to outline why I think the death penalty should be banned. Therefore, today I'll outline 3 reasons why the death penalty should be banned. Because it costs too much, because justice is not being served, and the worst thing of it all, falsely accusing someone and killing an innocent person. The first thing that I would like you to know is how the death penalty doesn't serve justice. This penalty should be banned because natural life in prison is the worst imaginable punishment available for us to charge a criminal. In the article, the New York Times, a man named Thomas J. Grasso, who was killed by the death penalty, before he was killed, he had gave a note to one of the persons that was one of the guards that was standing there, and he handed it to him saying, "Can read this note after I'm pronounced dead." And the note said, "Mario Cuomo is right. Life without parole is much worse than the death penalty." And Mario Cuomo was the lieutenant governor of New York. So this kind of evidence should prove that the death penalty should be banned. I mean, this is an inmate that was already killed by the death penalty, and he himself said it, quoting somebody after he was dead, that he was right, that he couldn't practically wait till be killed because he was tired of suffering in jail or in prison. Another reason that the death penalty should be banned is because it's costly. It costs too much. Now, I know some people say that they would rather have people sitting in prison dead because they're paying for them to be in prison. But it costs more for them having them sentenced to the death penalty. In the article, The Truth About Life Without Parole by the National Organization Advocating Individual Rights, stating, sentencing people to death by execution is 3 times more expensive than sentencing them to die in prison. Another quote by the NBCnews.com, a man named Donald McCartan, a former California jurist known as the hanging judge of Orange County, said it's 10 times more expensive to kill them than to keep them alive. Now, so you're paying more out of your taxes just to have somebody to be killed. Why not just let them rot in jail? Also, a study by the state's Commission on the Fair Administration of Justice in California, home to the nation's biggest death row population at 667, it costs an extra $90,000 per inmate to imprison someone sentenced to death. An additional expense that totals more than $63.3 million annually, according to an organization that did that. So you can see that how much it's costing us. It's more expensive. Somebody said it was 3 times, others said it was 10 times more than to imprison them than sending them to death. Another quote from the Fox News, Natasha Minsker, she was an author of a new report by the Northern California chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, found that the cash-strapped state could immediately save $1 billion by eliminating the death penalty and imposing sentences of life without parole. The alternative, if the cash-strapped state keeps the death penalty, they'll spend $400 million to build a new death row prison to house the growing number of prisoners. So why even bother wasting this kind of money? Also, going back towards taxpayers, the taxpayers in New Jersey have paid $253 million more for death penalty trials than they would have paid to trials not seeking execution. And an Urban Institute study of Maryland's experience with the death penalty found that a single death penalty trial costs $1.9 million more than a non-death penalty trial. This clearly outlines how expensive it is because of the death penalty and sending them to their execution. Instead, when we could just send them to life without parole and save a lot of money. The worst thing of it all is wrongfully accusing somebody and killing an innocent person. Quoted in the NBC News, some of the worst cases occurred in Illinois. In 2000, then Governor George H. Ryan placed on mortician on executions after 13 people had been exonerated from death row for reasons including genetic testing and recanted testimony. Ryan declared the system so fraught with error that it has come close to the ultimate nightmare, the state's taking of innocent life. So they had 13 people that they had to excuse from it. And not only outlining that, it's these people that are going through trial, it costs the state a lot of money just to even trial them. And then, so they wasted all this money sending them to trial them for execution, and they were ended up letting off because they obviously made a mistake. So, that's a bummer. A 52-year-old Gordon Randy, this is an example of what I was just talking about. A guy named Randy was released in 2004 after being exonerated of the 1986 stabbing death of a newlywed couple in Paris. He had an alibi of where he was going to be, but the only reason they convicted him was because they took a testimony by the city's drunk. He was known as the city's drunk. And they also took a testimony of he was another person that was known as the city's drug addict, which was later recanted. And he said, Randy quoted, "The state of Illinois spent $3.5 million trying to execute me, only to end up giving me a life sentence. And then 5.5 years after that, I was exonerated." So he was let off of it. So if you guys can see that quote right there was from a man that was sent to trial. They wasted $3.5 million on him, and not only that, he ended up getting off. So they made a mistake on it by taking false, like these testimonies by a drunk or a drug addict when he had alibis. So today I have outlined that the death penalty does not serve justice, it costs too much, and it could wrongfully accuse someone. So the usage of the death penalty as a punishment in the United States of America should be forbidden. Thank you.
Well, let me just double check, because sometimes I'm blind and I don't see what's going on. Shane, are you sitting out there and I didn't see you?
No.
Oh, okay. No, okay. I thought starting off with the murder scenario and the Arias case was fine. The example of her opinion on it is okay as a way to kind of build this idea that there is a better justice in allowing somebody to, as you put it, rot in prison. I do think that you need to develop the argument a little bit more about what the prison consequences mean, what problems might come up if we were to keep people in prison for the rest of their lives. Although it's not going to be too different, since in California we don't we sentence them to execution, but we don't ever execute them, not anymore. It's what's been 9 years since we executed somebody. So I think what you need to do though is talk about why those changes would be better in the prisons, because you are really making an argument here that this is a more appropriate punishment. There's a retribution kind of thing that's being made here, and I think that you need to build a little bit more of a standard for that. You actually start with that point in your introduction, and you go to that point in the beginning of your speech, but in the preview, it sounded like it was going to be the second point that you were going to talk with, and you were going to start about the cost issue. So those two things got inverted from the preview. They were still very distinct, and each one was, like I said, the one I think was not as well developed as it could be, but the cost issue I thought you did a very good job developing. You had a lot of information on that point, identifying trial issues, internment issues, appellate issues that all contribute to the cost. And I thought you did a pretty good job on that. So those first 2 points you develop pretty effectively. The third point is a little bit confusing because I think you're mixing a couple of points here. The case that you talk about at the end, for instance, they probably would have still spent that amount of money trying to convict the guy. Why would it have been less if it was not a death penalty case? That's not quite clear. That they would have gotten it wrong, that would still be true regardless of whether it was a death penalty case. The issue that comes up that I think is the most problematic is having spent that money and then having gotten the conviction. If he was executed and he was actually not guilty and he was exonerated by this other information, the DNA evidence, that I think would be a good value argument to develop. And I think you only partially develop that. You mostly are relying on that singular example, and most of it talks about all the effort that people put in to lock him up and convict him, not what the horrifying consequences would have been if we'd made that other choice. I thought that you did a nice job speaking to the audience, and your gestures and your eye contact were really solid. Sometimes your voice needs to be a little bit more fluid, but I think you just have a natural way of speaking that sometimes sounds like it's not always going from one word to the next, but you're a little hesitant as you're pausing. And that's just the way you talk. It's not like there's anxiety coming up. It's just that's a characteristic of the way you speak, I think. I hesitate to pick on the stupid things because it's just a stupid thing. Moratorium is the word that you were looking for, not mortician.
Oh.
Okay,
It was blank by staples on the way.
Yeah. So that's sort of just one of those little things. So not a big deal. Don't worry about it.